Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this next episode in our ongoing series, the top 70 albums of the 1970s. Here with me, of course, is John Stanek from Johnny Radio. And we're about to get into not quite the upper echelon of the list, but we're getting closer to the midpoint here.
Oh yeah, 50 to 41. It's getting better and better every episode, guys. And your votes have been outstanding as always. So can't wait to get into it. This is going to be a good one.
Indeed, indeed, my friend. So, with that out of the way, let's move on to number 50.
Van Halen, the debut album from 1978. Such a classic, and had such influence on so many bands throughout the 80s. Just with the opening track, Running with the Devil, you knew there was something different about these guys. Eddie Van Halen, no other guitarist sounds like this guy. And David Lee Roth, for that matter, no other singer sounded like him either, with the all the little things. I can't even do the noise that he would do, but on just about every song. But then Eruption, of course, the instrumental that actually I just saw a concert last week with a bunch of 80s bands, and CC DeVille from Poison played a little bit of Eruption in honor of Eddie Van Halen, which was really cool. So you can see as I said, the influence that they had. And then, of course, taking the influence as well from the Kinks, playing their hit song, You Really Got Me, and adding a whole different spin onto it. I prefer the Kinks version, but this is a really good cover. And then, so many great songs that continue to be hits to this day. Ain't Talking About Love, Jamie's Crying, which was sampled in Wild Thing by Tone Loc, of all things. Little Dreamer, I think, is a great song that's overlooked. And then, of course, Ice Cream Man, with all the sexual innuendo. It is such a fun album, and man, such a great rocker. I'm glad that it made the list.
Yeah, fun is a good word for it, for sure. This is really, Van Halen is the definitive hair metal band, no question about that. And really, it's that first side that really gets me, no pun intended. Just Running with the Devils, iconic. Really, You Really Got Me, such a great Kinks cover. And of course, Eruption. It's only less than 2 minutes long, but it is my favorite song on here, and
Yeah.
shows just how much of a virtuoso Eddie Van Halen was on guitar. Really, he's probably, for me, right under Hendrix, all-time guitarist. There's no question about the talent that dude had, how much he could shred, just virtuosity to the utmost degree. And of course, Jamie's Crying, just that, oh, Jamie's
Jamie's
crying.
crying. Yeah.
It's so catchy. For me, the second half isn't quite as good. There's nothing on it that is bad at all. But I tell you, just from top to bottom, this is a really solid record. Not sure why it's above the last three that we went over. But I know a lot of people really love this one, and I
Yeah.
get it. It's a really, really strong album overall, even if it's not one of my personal favorites from the 70s.
Yeah, and actually, this didn't even make my list, even though I have a Van Halen shirt. You got to love these guys. I personally like one of their later albums that we may get to whenever we get to the 80s, but a little more. But yeah, I'm glad this made the list. And yeah, great job, guys.
All right, and that takes us to number 49.
Plastic Ono Band by John Lennon, the first actual solo John Lennon album, I believe you could say. Well, if you're not counting the stuff he did with John and Yoko right before this, which I definitely don't count. Yoko is a part of this record a little bit, but the songs that really stand out here are Mother, which he was going through, I believe, something called primal scream therapy at the time, and really going back to his childhood. And this song is just, it's brutal about, how he was abandoned by both of his parents. And it's when he's screaming, "Mama, don't go, Daddy, come home," at the end. It's just like, oh my God. And a lot of people can relate in some way to that, what, either side or both. And then, songs like Isolation. There's some really dark stuff on this album, actually. Working Class Hero, he's dropping the F bomb. God, towards the end of the album, he's saying it's the end of the Beatles, the dream is over. Some really heavy stuff on the album. But then you've also got beautiful songs like Love, that I think perfectly encapsulates what love is all about. Just a very simple melody, but and the words also come off as simple yet very profound, which I think are some of the best Lennon solo tracks. But yeah, great album, and glad to see it here.
Yeah, this album is really, really good. It didn't make my list, but I can certainly see the appeal of it. Maybe even so over the other few that I just mentioned from the last episode. But I tell you, it's really Mother that is like beyond standout on this record. It's so painful to listen to, but in the best way possible. I've never heard anyone bare their soul quite like this in such a visceral way, and that's
Mhm.
what John Lennon was doing on this track, dealing with the death of Julia. And man, it is just one of the most powerful songs of his entire catalog. But man, there's so many great songs on here. Working Class Hero, as you said, this was such a departure from the Beatles stuff. Like this
Mhm.
really cemented him as his own kind of very, very cynical, dark, sort of persona in his songwriting that he'd gained, where you'd see with Paul, he had the more, fluffy, and I mean that in the best way possible, pop stuff, more uplifting. Really, you see the divergence between them, especially with this. And of course, I mean, also, I just love Hold On, kind of the song where he's
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
reassuring himself and Yoko, everything's going to be right. But the hold on, John, John, hold on, it's
Yeah.
gonna be all right. I mean, it's just such a beautiful melody. It's less than 2 minutes, but it's absolutely astounding. I found out as another hard rocker that sounds like very similar to like Your Blues on the White
Mhm.
Album. And also, yeah, God is yet again another wonderful, wonderful track. Even if you don't necessarily agree with the sentiment of it, I completely understand where he's coming from. And of course, shouting lines like "I don't believe in Robert Zimmerman," like
Yeah.
all these like great statements about all these like pop icons
Yeah.
and the Beatles, and very, very soul bearing album. And I think in this case, in the best way possible, maybe a little too raw for some, but it doesn't quite hit me like I guess Imagine. But I tell you,
Mhm.
man, it is a strong album nonetheless, and I think one of the better Beatles solo albums for sure.
Oh, absolutely. It would make my top five, yeah,
Yeah,
solo Beatles records for sure.
I agree with you
And
there.
that's saying something, man, because I mean, McCartney had a lot of great ones as well, but I'm sure we'll get to one or two of those as well. But yeah, we're
We'll
off to a
see.
great start here, guys.
All right, and that will take us to number 48. Harvest by Neil Young. Technically his third appearance on this list, but you could call it fourth considering like how all over the place he is featured on these albums and whatnot.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, the
yeah,
last
and
waltz too. Yeah.
indeed, but definitely, I definitely think this is the last Neil Young album on the list, unfortunately. But hey, I mean, still, he's very represented on this list, which is great. But yeah, this is really one of his best albums, and surprisingly enough, I don't love this album. I really, really enjoy it. And I know a lot of people say, come on, it's his best album, but hear me out. I think this is a little inconsistent when it comes to especially the arrangements, because some of these arrangements with the orchestrations are very overblown and don't really fit with a lot of the folk stuff on here, which I find really, really great and very powerful.
Mhm.
Especially the title track is one of Neil Young's best songs, and just talking about this kind of woman who's not, really, I guess, equipped to commitment. And it really is one of his most beautiful, beautiful songs. and of course, I also really do like A Man Needs a Mate. I like the sentiment of it, but the orchestration yet again is a little overblown. But Heart of Gold was like his biggest hit. Not my favorite Neil Young song, but of course it's an undeniable classic. Gotta love that track. That keep me searching for
For
a
a
heart of
heart of
gold. You
gold.
know,
Gotta
I'm
love it. Yeah.
old. You know, it's just brilliant. And of course, my favorite song on here probably, and I think one of Neil Young's absolute probably top 5 songs, Old Man.
Mm,
Just how he's comparing, the story about how he bought this his ranch from this old man at the time, and how he kind of identified with him, like, old man, take a look at my life, I'm a lot like you were, and just the
yeah.
lonely, and really the thing that makes the song is James Taylor with that banjo. It's like such a unexpected thing, just him saying, "Oh, I'm gonna do this," and it
Mhm.
really makes that song. And then, "Old man, take a look at my life. I'm a
I'm a
lot
lot
like
like
you."
you.
It's just so
It's almost a
brilliant.
little reminiscent of Father and Son, Cat Stevens,
Yeah, yeah.
like
I
the
not
same kind of vibe, even though it's
right.
not two different people. But yeah.
Sure. I mean, I don't think it's a better song, though. I obviously Neil Young is a better songwriter than Cat Stevens, I think, without question. But man, it is just such a powerful track, and musically stands out, and melodically as well. And then of course you have songs like Alabama, which is really good. You had another song about the South, and him talking about that sort of thing. But it's an optimistic one, and of course the Needle and the Damage Done is just like 2 minutes, but man, it is one of his most one of his darkest, most powerful tracks, talking
Hmm.
about, the heroin addiction that would eventually overcome, a couple of members of his band. And also I just don't think, like, the last song, like, Words Between the Lines of Age, like, it just goes on for too long. I love Neil Young's guitar playing, but it doesn't really do a whole lot for me. But
Hmm.
overall, as you can see from what I'm saying, this is a really, really good record.
Yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying about it being uneven, but
Mhm.
like you said, I mean, where it really soars, I mean, it's some of his absolute greatest songs of all
One of his
time are
most
on here.
iconic albums.
Yeah, yeah. The three big hits that you mentioned are three of my all-time faves of Neil for sure. Heart of Gold, Old Man, Needle and the Damage Done. And yeah, the title track is great too. So yeah, really strong one, and I wasn't surprised to see it on here. Sad that it's the last Neil, but we've got a good dose of him here, so I'm excited.
Yeah, man. As I said, he's well represented, and when talking about a '70s list, you got to have Neil Young on there somewhere. So a great
Absolutely.
pick, guys, and that will take us to number 47. Hotel California by the Eagles. This is something, me saying this didn't make my list of the 70 albums of the '70s, which yet again is another affirmation of how great this decade is, because I absolutely love this album. I think it's the Eagles' best album. I think most people would tell you that. But I mean, just for the title track alone, I mean, come on, one of the greatest songs of all
Mhm.
time, that 6.5 minute opus of decadence, and just the kind of cueing into the rock lifestyle in a very, very cryptic way. One of the most unbelievable songs lyrically that people have dissected years upon years. And of
Mhm.
course, I mean, Don Henley's vocals on this thing are just some of his absolute best. That chorus, everybody knows it, even if you've never, like, heard this album before. I know I certainly did. But of course, so many brilliant lines talking about the lifestyle,
Mhm.
especially in just the metaphorical sense of, comparing it to, like, this hotel, you can check out anytime you
Anytime you
like, but
like,
you
but
can
you can
never
never
leave.
leave.
It's
Yeah.
and of course I
Uh,
love great lines like, they try to stab it with their steely knives, but they
but they
just
just
can't kill
can't
the
kill the
beast,
beast.
because
Yeah.
apparently Walter Becker's girlfriend, he wrote in one of Steely Dan's songs, she keeps listening to the Eagles, and he hated the Eagles. So Don Henley was like, all right, I'm going to throw in this reference to Steely Dan. It was a tasteful one at that. So that
Mm.
was really great. And obviously that Joe Walsh, that dual guitar
Uh,
solo, man. I mean,
One of the
there's nothing
best.
like it. Really, just so the definition of iconic. This song I hardly get sick of. And I think the whole A side is just incredible. New Kid in Town is
Hmm.
just a beautiful, beautiful ballad about kind of the up, the rise and fall of fame, with some really great complex chord progressions and a great, I think maybe one of Glenn Fry's best vocal performances on any Eagles record. Just
Hmm.
beautiful, beautiful song. Life in the Fast Lane is a classic rock staple, undeniably so. It just has such a cool riff, that dun, 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 and then of
Hmm.
course that dun, 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 that cool groove and the life in the fast lane, and just yet again another, because this was the darkest the Eagles had ever gone, because they had a lot of love songs and ballads about women who were unfaithful to their husbands, all that sort of stuff. But this was one where they're like kind of looking, being very critical of the life that they were living and the life that they were seeing around them, especially them like ODing on pills. They got to get the, call the doctor, you got to pay a fee or whatever he says in the song. It's just
Hmm.
so brilliant displaying this lifestyle. As I said, Wasted Time yet again is a great Don Henley ballad. And I think the second half is really when it takes a dip, because then it
Hmm.
becomes very boring classic rock song, which doesn't really have, sounds exactly the same, doesn't really stand out whatsoever. But I think the last track on here, The Last Resort, where Don Henley's talking about how they damned this land, these capitalists who, which is funny because he's very, very much a capitalist. But I
Hmm.
do appreciate the ideology that he's getting at, where they basically abuse the land for their own profit. And surprisingly, this song doesn't have a chorus; it's just a bunch of verses.
Hmm.
And but I
Hmm.
think it's a brilliant way to end an album that is pretty inconsistent but undeniably a classic.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm glad this made the list, because as I said, it wasn't on mine, and it's
Yeah,
great.
I had to just double check my list too because I couldn't remember if I had it on mine or not, but I didn't either. So it just goes to show how many of you guys love it. And I mean, come on, it, like you said, it is the best Eagles album by far, just for the title track alone. But yeah, the whole of side A is great. Life in the Fast Lane, absolute classic. But yeah, you really said it all. I mean, I'm not that big of an Eagles fan in general, and I still think it's kind of amazing. That's a whole other subject, that their greatest hits album is like one of the best selling records of all time.
Yeah,
But a lot of people just absolutely love these guys. I guess it makes sense because they're like almost a little bit on the countryside, so it's like
yeah,
pulling a
no,
little
for
bit
sure.
of multiple genres that people love into one. So but yeah, they knocked it out of the park with Hotel California, man. Amazing track.
Absolutely. And also I just think when it comes to country rock, there's not many who have done it better than the Eagles, and
Hmm.
I do love the Eagles, even though none of their albums made my list. So it's good to see them on
Yeah.
the 70s list regardless. And that will take us to number 46.
It's a god awful small affair.
Hunky Dory by David Bowie, the first appearance of Bowie on this list. And yeah, I mean, this is an album that for some reason I don't quite love it, but it's undeniably great. What
Hmm.
an absolute classic, and really the one that broke him through to critical and commercial success, especially with songs like Changes, which is such a beautiful anthem about embracing change and just going through with your life, and kind of like looking at it in a positive light, that you're going to go through these changes, turn and face the strange, and just talking about the political connotations of the time too. Brilliant, brilliant Bowie track. And
Hmm.
also so many beautiful songs like "Oh You Pretty Things," yet again kind of like dealing with that cultural divide between, at that time, which was very, very prevalent. Also, I mean, Kooks is another fun song about, talking about his son, who was just born, who obviously has, gone on to be a very successful filmmaker in his
Hmm.
own right. And of course, I mean, I'm just blanking on the song. I apologize. Queen Bitch is an absolute
Mm.
banger, which actually the Killers took that part of, like that beat. She 10 minute, like that kind of line, the rapid fire delivery
Hmm.
for Mr. Brightside, which I found, and once you hear the song, you hear that connection almost
That makes sense.
immediately.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Great guitar riff too. And I love how they use it. Well, they use actually multiple songs from this album in The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, the Wes Anderson film.
I
But
want to see that one.
oh yeah, you haven't seen it? You got to see it, man.
That's
You're
one
gonna
of the
love it.
few. It's one of the few.
Okay, but yeah, so not to give it away, but they use it perfectly in the actual song. And there's also a guy doing covers of Bowie in the movie. So really cool. And Life on Mars is another one. And that was used recently in a
Oh
PTA
yeah.
movie to great effect as
And
well.
you know, that was when I revisited it and I was just like, oh my goodness. I think unquestionably his
Mhm.
best song. Like
Yeah,
without question.
that's hard
And
to argue.
yeah, man. I mean, one of the greatest songs ever written, even if you're not a huge Bowie fan, which I admit I'm not huge on Bowie like a lot of other people are. I
I'm not
love the
either, but
guy,
yeah,
but this, I mean, he's a genius. I mean, just listen to
yeah.
that one song. Nobody could write. Just the political implications, the double entendre, everything about it is wrapped up in this beautiful masterpiece about, you know, kind of like trying to find purpose in life.
And his
And just
vocals are incredible on this track.
oh
Like I'm not that big, especially on his vocals. I on many songs, I'm usually like, okay, that doesn't really do it for me. But on this one, man, like he really hit some notes that I didn't know he had in him until the first time I heard this song. And yeah, the piano is incredible, very intricate. Um, brilliant song. Just for this song alone, it deserves to be on this list.
oh, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, just that licorice pizza trailer, man. I mean, and also when it
Yeah,
was used in the movie when Gary's running to, you know, towards the
yeah,
gas station. I
right,
mean, just
yeah.
absolutely brilliant. And I just think the thing for me, like, I don't know why, because I love most of the songs on this album, but I think the second half really kind of dips off. And
Hmm.
I like the sentiment of the Belway brothers, or the Bewley brothers, but I just feel at that point it's just kind of like it's kind of like a downer to end it on, and not in a musically gratifying way. I
Yeah,
guess it's
and
just
I
like,
like
oh,
the
on
shout
this,
outs to Andy Warhol and Bob Dylan,
right?
but I think
Song
those
for
are
Bob
two of the
Dylan.
weaker tracks also.
Really,
But
I actually love Song for Bob Dylan. You know, just
yeah,
voice of Sand and Glue, which obviously I love that they referenced in Coda. A lot of movies
right.
from 2021 are, you know, have references to the songs on this album,
Yeah,
which
shows
is
its
great.
staying power, man. Yeah.
Absolutely. And just that album cover, the very androgynous sort
Hmm.
of looking figure, which obviously Bowie would go on to like basically define that sort of thing and obviously influence artists like Patti Smith, as we saw
Hmm.
in the cover of Horses and everything. But
Right.
yeah, this is, you know, whether this is my favorite album from the 70s or not, I'm glad to see it on the list because it's undeniably great. So great choice, guys.
Hmm.
And that is going to bring us to number 45.
I look high, I look low, I'm looking everywhere I go.
Ram by Paul and Linda McCartney. Really, this is Paul's show, though, and really one of the absolute best Beatles solo albums. You know, just kicking it off with "Too Many People," which is just so
Mm.
catchy. And it sounds like at the beginning it was like "Piss off, yeah," you know, and just the song
Yeah,
basically how
so
there's
good.
the lyrics in it, how everyone talks about, you know, he's talking about John and Yoko, and really this kind of feud that started between them and the media, obviously, who
That
blew it
was
up.
your first mistake. Oh
Yo,
man,
you
so
took
many good
the
melodies in this one song.
oh
Oh.
my goodness, like not many songs have this many good hooks,
Hmm.
but it just shows you how great of a pop songwriter Paul McCartney is. I mean, really undeniably the best,
Hmm.
and on so many great songs. Obviously, Ram On is also, you know, with that I think it's like the uke, right? He's playing it. At least
Yeah,
it sounds like it.
I
Just
think
so
so.
brilliant. Of course, Dear Boy just shows like the technical you know, kind of prowess with the harmonies and the multi, you know, the polyphonic textures in there where they're all going off in all different directions. And of course, I mean, probably I think the best song on here, Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey, is just like this opus, you know, kind of
Really
something he
cool.
would perfect later on with Band on the Run, but just starting off with the rain and we're so sorry, Uncle
Uncle
Albert,
Albert. Yeah.
you know, and then of course Linda doing the hands across the water,
Yeah.
water, and just that drowned sound that the vocal effect they put on her voice is so brilliant.
Hmm.
Smile Away is another great one. Who's like people talking about his teeth, and I don't know, it's some crazy stuff. Heart of the Country,
I
is
love Heart of the Country, man.
oh
So
man,
good.
and just talking about him and Linda living on the farm with the kids. I mean, it's such a heartfelt track. Then of
Hmm.
course you have songs like Monkberry Moon Delight, which is just absolute nonsense in the best
Yeah.
way possible. And everyone's like, it's just like one of his best vocal
Yeah.
performance. I just absolutely love it because of the absurdity of it, but also just the power. Like the fact he's putting so much effort in this song that makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
Eat at
Yeah.
Home is yet another great pop melody, which is just a song about him wanting to eat at home with Linda. It's a very, very domesticated album. The
Hmm.
backseat of my car. Yeah,
Ah,
man. Another
great
great track
closer,
to
man.
close
Yeah.
it out. There's and this really is crazy to me that this was panned when it came out, because people look at this now, obviously you see where it is on this list, and everyone says that it is like a landmark in indie pop. And it's just because everyone said it was like his granny music, if you want to
Mm.
call it. But yeah, I get lyrically it's nowhere near to the level of quality as the Beatles stuff. But then again, I mean, how can you not love these songs? They're so
Hmm.
catchy, they're so memorable, and I
Yeah.
think this is one of the absolute best album. Paul is my favorite solo Beatle, actually. Not the
Hmm.
best songwriter at this point in time, but man, these melodies just stick in your head. It's a brilliant album.
Yeah, so great. It was on my list, and so I'm glad to see it here. Also, I wish that his solo debut, McCartney, made it. Sadly, I don't think it did, but I like that one even more, especially for Maybe I'm Amazed. But this feels almost like an extension of that, where Paul is still doing just about everything himself, musically, and drums included, on a lot of this stuff. And it again goes to show what a genius of a musician he was and a songwriter. I mean, so many of these songs are just absolutely, all the ones that we've mentioned and more. I mean, this is I think one of his most solid. Like you said, I'd put it up there, definitely top 5 McCartney solo albums
This is like
without a doubt.
this is like top 3 solo Beatle albums for me.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore this, and and obviously it did make my list. And I'll give you Maybe I'm Amazed. Kind of okay with McCartney not making the list, because I think it's a little too lo-fi, and a lot of the songs don't really
Yeah, this
stand
one's a
out in the
little
way
more
these ones.
polished,
Oh,
overall.
absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
that's why I love it so much, because it really, as you said, it's like these songs are so well thought out, so well crafted.
Hmm.
And that's what you get from Paul McCartney. Absolutely one of the greatest musicians of all time, and still killing it to this day. And
Hmm.
just 80 years old. Unbelievable. But he is still in great tip top shape. So, yeah, guys, that is going to take us to number 44.
Bitches Brew by Miles Davis. We got some Miles on the list, some jazz here, which I'm excited always to have jazz make the list. Even though this album, believe it or not, I'm not a huge fan of. And as you see on my wall of perfect albums behind me, I do have Kind of Blue there. I guess I'm more of a fan of just, the classic jazz of the 50s, late 50s, I should say, early 60s, more so than the jazz fusion that he's going for here. This came out in 1970, right after 1969's In a Silent Way, which made our 60s list. Wasn't as crazy about that one either, but all that being said, it's amazing how Miles kept, at least attempting to reinvent himself in not just every decade, but it seemed like every couple of years. And this just went further and further into exploring. He brought back John McLaughlin on electric guitar, and Chick Corea on electric piano, and just a who's who of players on this record. But of course, Miles takes the lead, and maybe that's what it is. Like, I think I love the sax more than I do the trumpet on most jazz records, and I think he gave more of an equal time to Coltrane on some of the older stuff, and this one he's really kind of taken the reins, and in my opinion, to maybe a little bit of the album's detriment, even though it does hold up to this day as most people would say as one of the great jazz records of all time.
Yeah, I mean, look, I knew this was going to make the list, or at least I had a feeling because it's always in the top 100 on the Rolling Stone list of the 500 greatest albums.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest with you, I think this album's overrated, and it's a really, really solid
Mm-hmm.
record. But the thing is about it for me, and also I will say, just the fact that they put post production on a jazz album was like unheard of at the time. So you got to
Mm-hmm.
respect it for that, just the musical ambition of it. It's like, do I want to listen to this for 94 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
94 minutes? No, I don't. And I think that there's a lot of Admiral stuff on here, especially Sanctuary, that closing track, which is absolutely beautiful. I mean, there's a lot, and of course, I mean, so many cool stuff on here, but I don't want to listen to these jazz songs for 26 minutes on end. It just gets a little monotonous, and I appreciate the ambition of it. I actually rate this album fairly highly, but it's more out of respect for what he did than how much I actually enjoy listening to this. I mean, I'll just fall asleep after listening to this album. I know this is not, I like this more than Abraxas, surprisingly, but that is definitely a more accessible record. And yeah, it's one I appreciate more than I actually enjoy.
No, I'm pretty
Um,
much with you. I mean,
no,
yeah, I guess overrated. Yeah, I'd probably
a
agree
little
with
bit,
you there. Yeah,
just
for sure.
because I just don't get how, with all due respect, I just don't get how anybody can listen to this for so long. It just gets a little tedious for me, but it certainly is a really solid record and an influential one. So I will give it that.
Yeah, good. And I mean, deserves to be on the list for
Yeah.
sure, no doubt.
And the musicality on it is obviously incredible, as you'd
Yeah.
expect from Miles Davis. So yeah, all right. Hey, good pick. I probably want to put it lower down the list, but hey, you
Mhm.
guys seem to love it, so I guess that's cool with us. And so that is going to take us to number 43.
Saturday Night Fever, the soundtrack of the movie, which more or less is a Bee Gees album, although there are various artists on here, but Barry Gibb and the boys taking up most of it. And I think that's really where it's at its strongest. Songs like Staying Alive, I mean, come on, one of the greatest, not just disco songs of all time, but just, mixture of R&B, pop, dance, just one of the greatest songs of all time. Such a cool guitar riff, and the bass line, just that song alone is incredible. And then you've got one of the Bee Gees' greatest ballads of all time, How Deep Is Your Love, which just the harmonies are incredible. I mean, whether you like the Bee Gees or not, you gotta just give it to them. Like, nobody sounded like these guys. Those high harmonies are just brilliant. You got Night Fever, More Than a Woman, If I Can't Have You. I mean, I can't believe that these guys were just knocking out these songs left and right at this time. Just incredible.
On the fly too. Like
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
literally just come up with these in the studio and that was it. Nothing beforehand.
Unreal, man. I mean, those songs are also good. And then you got Jive Talking, You Should Be Dancing, which is an incredible dance song that even the Foo Fighters, as the DGs recently did a cover of, which actually was really good as well. But I think some of the other tracks on here by the other artists aren't quite as good, but they're all capitalizing on this disco sound, even doing some classical in a disco setting with a fifth of Beethoven. And then you've got Calypso Breakdown, Night on Disco Mountain, Boogie Shoes by Casey and the Sunshine Band. It's just, there's not really any weak songs. I know you may think differently, but I absolutely think this deserves its spot on the list.
So I completely understand that, and I actually just listened to this again before filming this, and what I will say, I mean, I have a lot to say about this album, I really do.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you one thing: that A side is one of the greatest A sides to any album ever. Just Staying Alive, How Deep Is Your Love, which is one of my top 20 favorite songs of all time. I've probably listened to that song like over 300 times, no exaggeration. It is just their most powerful ballad. and just cause we're living in a world of fools breaking us down. You know,
Yeah.
it's just so beautiful, and just
Mhm.
those sins. It's just so subdued, but you feel the passion pouring out in every single note. Just incredible. And obviously, Staying Alive is definitely probably my third favorite Bee Gees song, because I love More Than a Woman. That is
Oh yeah,
probably
that's
top
great
100
too.
songs of all time for me. It's just such a great groove, but such a beautiful sentiment attached to it as well.
Hmm.
Night Fever, If I Can't Have You, the Yvonne Elliman version, which is just such a classic. I mean, just that side alone. And I also really love A Fifth of Beethoven. It's so funky. It sounds like
Hmm.
if you mix like Stevie Wonder with Herbie Hancock, and it's really, and of course Beethoven. It's
Yeah.
really such a bizarre track, but it's one that's just such a killer one at that. But my biggest thing with this album, first off, because I already talked about how great those tracks are, it's very front loaded, like literally the best songs
Hmm.
right at the beginning. Once after Fifth of Beethoven, that second side's a little weak. I mean, I don't know why there's another version of More Than a Woman. You don't need it.
Right.
Manhattan Shire Skyline, it's whatever. Calypso Breakdown doesn't really do a whole lot for me. It's just kind of
Hmm.
gets monotonous after almost 8 minutes. Um,
Sure.
Night on Disco Mountain is a little, it's cool. I do like that one, but Open Sesame is like epitomizes disco at its absolute worst. It is such a stupid song. I do not like it. It is probably the turd on this album. It is really a bad disco song.
Hmm.
Just up there with something like Disco Duck or something. Maybe not quite that atrocious. But of
Yeah.
course, I mean, all the Bee Gees stuff is amazing. Though
Hmm.
I really do like You Should Be Dancing, now my favorite Bee Gees song, but obviously it's a really great track to dance to. Boogie
Hmm.
Shoes, obviously fantastic. And of course, Disco Inferno, I have to mention. Should it go on for
Yeah.
11 minutes? I don't know, but it's still really good.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. When you think
you
about
know,
the time frame, just everybody was coked up and on the dance floor, I guess, and these days. So it was like even the movie, there
yeah.
wasn't much of a plot. It was just about the dancing, It was
Well,
like,
I wouldn't say that. I mean, it's definitely a character study. This guy, which got John Travolta his first Oscar nomination and broke him out to
right.
superstardom.
Yeah.
But I think, it's the music that really holds up as well. There's elements of that film that I think are a little dated in the presentation of it, but just
Right.
Travolta dancing and breaking it loose on that dance floor with all these iconic songs. I mean, I get why it took off, but I don't understand why it's always on all the list of the 500 greatest albums. Like, because there's soundtrack albums that are probably even more solid. But I mean, it has so many. Basically, most of these songs defined the latter years of the 1970s, and
Hmm.
though, yeah, I mean, there definitely is one of the best disco albums of all time. But I think there's one that may or may not be higher on this list that I would definitely have above it, and yeah, I mean, it's a really good album. I just think has a lot of structuring issues and a lot of inconsistency with some
Yeah,
track, and
yeah.
just
It's a little overlong, but
yeah,
and I know what you're saying about one or two of those songs, but yeah, as far as I would be totally okay if it was just the Bee Gees songs,
yeah,
and
me too.
because
Because
that's the strongest stuff. But
well, that was what I was gonna say. Because on my list I put the greatest compilation from
mm,
1978. I think that to me is like, if I'm gonna listen to the Bee Gees, I'm gonna listen to that. But
sure,
obviously, just in some of them capitalizing on some of those disco sounds, doesn't really hold up to today. But the
yeah.
best stuff on here is absolutely incredible. So I get why this album made the list. I really like it myself. And yeah,
Hmm.
guys, that is going to take us to number 42.
Marquee Moon by Television from 1977. Such a great rock record. Tom Verlaine and Richard Lloyd, the dueling guitarists, that just the title track alone is so incredible, almost 10 minutes long and does not feel like it. Just that guitar riff where he's doing that little internet, and then the way that it builds is so cool. And really all of side A is just so fun. See No Evil, Venus, Friction, especially kind of the play on words. And, when he's saying, listen to my diction. It's so fun. I love his voice is like, I'm not sure who exactly off the top of my head he sounds like, but I know that it's somebody. You'll probably think of it, but they came up, of course, in the New York CBGB scene at the time of like Talking Heads were coming on the scene as well. And you got kind of like a little bit of that punk rock attitude, but there's just so much good guitar playing on this record from both of them. Switching off on lead, of course, Richard was a little bit more of a virtuoso, but Verlaine's playing as well is really emotional, especially on the closing track on this album, Torn Curtain, which I think is one of the best album closers to any record in this decade. Just another one that really builds up. And I think that was one of the songs they wrote at the last minute because they had the whole album kind of planned out except for that one. And then they decided to end it real strong. So although the other songs on side B, I don't think are quite as strong, Torn Curtain makes up for that in a big way. So I know you're not as crazy about this album, but would love to hear what you think about it.
All right. I'm going to tell you guys something. This is actually my least favorite album on the entire list.
What?
But yeah, it's good. It's pretty decent. And look, I admit on this one, I won't quite say it's overrated because I admit on this one that it might just be a me thing. I just don't get it. I think really it's Tom Verlaine's voice that doesn't do it for me. No, I don't. I can't think of who he sounds like. But I'd rather not, honestly. He's not a bad vocalist, but after a while, he just really starts grating on me. But I love the playing on here, especially from Billy Fica on the drums. One of the best drummers I've ever heard, especially on Friction, which is actually my favorite song on this album. So much fun, as you said, like a lot of those songs on the first time. But I think the thing for me, really, none of the melodies really stand out to me, like jump out at me. Like that's why this album just it's not that memorable to me because and this is very controversial. Like the title track, I love the instrumental outro of it. I don't get the huge appeal. I get it was like this huge post-punk song that was really influential, but I just think that it doesn't stick out to me melodically. And I get it's on all the list of the 500 greatest songs of all time, all of them, but I just never understood the appeal of this over something like maybe Talking Heads or someone else from that scene. But really, once I get to Torn Curtain, I know you really love it and that's great, but I just can't do it after all that time. Like it's not like this is bad or any. It's just like after a while I'm just like kind of numb to it. It just doesn't really work for me, and I think it's the vocals. But obviously it's a very influential album in post-punk, and so I'm not really going to act like this is the most overrated album ever. Even if it is my least favorite on this list, I still appreciate it for what it is. It's just I don't get it. I guess
I think it's one of those albums that maybe for me it was just the way that I came to it, which was in all things in a record store in Delaware. So they had it playing on the loudspeaker, and I was just like looking through records, and I'm like, that's really cool. And then another song, I was like, oh man, this is cool. What is this? And then, he showed me what it was. And I was like, I'll have to go check that out later. And it's the perfect kind of story for an album like this, because it's not one that a lot of people would necessarily hear about, like Hotel California or something. It's just It feels like an underground record, and I think the vocals do have a part in that. And I just realized who I think he reminds me of a little bit is Jeff Mangum from Neutral Milk Hotel.
Oh,
because it's not a great vocal. It's he's a little out of key here and there, and it almost like, I don't know if you overlook his not on key and his not necessarily great performance, there's a lot of emotion behind the performance. And I don't know, I think maybe if you gave it a second chance you might like it more. But
I listened to like 1.5 times. So, or yeah, something like that.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
and I will say, obviously, we'll get into that when we get to the '90s. But Jeff Mangum's voice, I think he's definitely more accurate. He's just a bit more raw. But I could see what you mean. And obviously, yeah, we'll get into him later. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. This album just doesn't do it for me.
I get
That's
it.
about it. I'd probably put lower on this list, but I know a lot of people seem to love it if it made it to this spot.
Good
And
pick,
yeah,
guys.
so
Yeah.
all right, that's going to take us to number 41. Lola versus Power Man and the Money Go Round, Part 1, by the Kinks, but there was never a Part 2. So
I'm still waiting for part 2, man.
yeah, have that be the reunion album. I hear they're getting back together.
That would
So
be amazing.
That might be the way to do it. But yeah, I mean, this is really, I think, the last great album in that classic run of albums, which I believe all of them made our 60s list.
Yeah.
So of course this one was going to make this, and I don't quite like it more than those albums because I think the production, the vocals are a little muddy, but you could say that about a lot of the other Kinks albums. But yeah, this was on my list. I absolutely love this record, and just the concept of it, kind of like them dealing with the stardom and the pop charts, and kind of like that rise to fame, if you will, and kind of like dealing with the after effects of that, and just the thematic cohesion throughout these songs, especially with like Strangers, which is obviously really, I wish I would love that song if it weren't for the vocals being drowned, but I think that's one that continues to grow and grow on me, used so well in the Darjeeling Limited too, which I absolutely loved in that movie. And of course, really dark songs like Get Back in the Line, where he's talking about, the kind of bread line, kind of being bummed out and kind of taking handouts because he hasn't been being successful. I mean, some really, really dark stuff. And of course, I mean, beautiful songs, which were also in the Darjeeling Limited, like This Time Tomorrow is just him wondering, about, this kind of like his meditation, Ray Davies' meditation on fame, if you will. And of course, Gotta Be Free is a great closer, which, kind of bookends with the Contenders, obviously. But obviously, I think the highlights on this album, definitely the title track, which is one of the most classic Kinks songs, one that everybody knows, and just shows once again, I mean, so transgressive for the time, talking about this like transgender woman, and it's just such a funny song too, like just like, well, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but when she held me tight, she nearly broke my spine.
Yeah.
It's just that
oh
classic,
my Lola.
Yeah. And then of course la 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 Lola, and just the way he introduces the song, with
such
champagne.
a good guitar riff, man, too.
Oh, dude, yeah, Dave Davies, man, such an underrated guitarist. I always say that about that guy. And of course, this song is just so brilliant, talking about this guy getting with this this woman, Lola, but he realizes, he comes to a realization in that song.
Yes.
But honestly, to me, I don't know about you. I know your favorite song is Lola, but my favorite song on here is actually Ape Man.
Oh, I love Ape Man, dude.
Oh my goodness.
Those are my two favorites too. Yeah.
Okay, well, good. We can at least agree on that, because it's just
definitely.
I'm an ape man, I'm an ape man, oh, I'm an ape man. Just one of the catchiest Kinks songs, and just that fake like Jamaican accent he's put. It might be a little problematic now, but dude, just the stuff he's talking about, like trying to get away from the very
I don't want to die in a nuclear war,
right? And I just love that line where you get a little bit of I guess not alliteration, but kind of like that homophone where he's like, the air pollution is a fucking up my eyes.
Oh yeah.
He gets out,
great.
So it's just such a brilliant song, and just talking about, I want to be in the jungle swinging on trees, and so, I mean, it's just so like so catchy. And yeah, man,
it's one of the best because it's like, so catchy, but also so ridiculous, but also relatable. It's like, it's all the best things about the Kinks.
On it too, like this whole album.
Yeah, and like it's basically a bit of a concept album, and I think it succeeds as well.
Oh yeah.
even though, you know, the whole thing of Lola versus Power Man doesn't quite make sense, but Power Man is also a really strong song. Another great guitar riff on that one. Another really underrated gem is A Long Way From Home. I think that's a beautiful ballad,
Oh,
and one of the
absolutely.
best of this era. And then, yeah, like you said, Got to Be Free is such a great closer. This actually is my favorite Kinks album.
Wow.
It's I know you disagree on that, but uh, it's hard to argue that this is their best from the 70s for
Oh
sure,
yeah,
and
100%, no
was
question.
certainly on my list. So I'm so excited that this is on the list. I think it could even be a little bit higher, honestly.
I think it's at a good spot. I honestly put it lower, but obviously I love this album. So the fact that the Kinks made the 70s list as well as the 60s, just just so great to see that a lot of people like us love the Kinks too, and maybe
Yeah,
that's why we're all here. We're just a bunch of dumb old Kinks fans. I don't know,
we're a
but
bunch of
one of my
ape men.
right. But yeah, man, one of my top three favorite bands of all time. So great to see this album, their best from the 70s, on this list. And yeah, that's going to conclude it for this episode, guys. I mean, it's just
Man,
crazy to think that we covered so much ground on this episode. It's
yeah.
unbelievable. And to think that there's even more classic albums on the way, it just
Oh
blows
yeah.
my mind still.
Yeah, almost at the midway point here, and can't wait to see what's next. Because my God, it's been like nothing but classic after classic. So, guys, just thank you so much for voting, being a part of it, for all your comments, and can't wait to see where we go from here. Be sure to, of course, subscribe to Nathaniel's channel. He's got so much great content other than this countdown, and hopefully more countdowns to come after this. But yeah, thanks for having me be a part of this.
Absolutely. And be sure to subscribe to Johnny Radio, not just because the next episode is going to be on his channel, but because he has so much great content as well. So definitely looking forward to see what you put on there soon. And yeah, guys, thanks again for tuning into this episode. And until next week, we will see you.
Peace out.
I'm an ape man, no, I'm an